All right, my name is Jonathan, if we haven't had a chance to meet yet, and I get to work here as the lead pastor, and I'm really glad to get to do that. So if you've been with us for over a year now, we've been going over the gospel according to Luke. And so if you open up a Bible, the Bible is full of 66 different books. It's a collection of different books. And one of those is the gospel according to Luke. And so there was a real guy 2,000 years ago named Luke, and he took the time to write down the story of Jesus, which he believed was the good news. And one of the big questions that Luke wants us to see of why he wanted to write this is he wanted us to wrestle with this idea of who is Jesus? Who is this guy who lived 2,000 years ago? What did he claim? What did he say? And for us to be able to say, as we're looking at these things that he said, as we're looking at these things that he claimed, as we're trying to figure all of this out, for us to make our own individual personal decisions, for us to decide who exactly is this guy. And today, the lens that we're going to look at this question, that Luke is going to have us look through this question, is this idea of, is Jesus good or is Jesus bad? Is Jesus representing the good things and pushing for the good things in this world? Or is Jesus actually some sort of like a secret agent who's actually working for the bad side? So to kind of get a little bit of a lens of that, I want to show a short video. This is just a minute. This is the beginning of a video that our Friends of the Bible Project put together that I think puts such an important lens on this story and really over, as you're going to see in a second, the whole story of the Bible. So watch this video together, and then we'll go on with the text for today.
So in the Bible, the ideas of heaven and earth are ways of talking about God's space and our space.
So I understand our space really well. We live here, there's trees, rivers, mountains. But my understanding of God's space gets a little fuzzy.
And what we do get in the Bible are images trying to help us grasp God's space, which is basically inconceivable to us.
So these are two very different types of spaces.
Yes, they're different in their nature, but here's what's really interesting is that in the Bible, these are not always separate spaces. So think of heaven and earth as like different dimensions that can overlap in the same exact space.
So we talk a lot about going to heaven after we die, but this idea of heaven and earth overlapping, we don't talk a lot about that.
Which is kind of crazy because the union of heaven and earth is what the story of the Bible is all about. How they were once fully united and then driven apart, and about how God is bringing them back together once again.
Everybody get that? So in case you missed it, just in case.
It's just kind of crazy because the union of heaven and earth is what the story of the Bible is all about. How they were once fully united and then driven apart, and about how God is bringing them back together once again.
One more time, what is the story of the Bible about?
Which is kind of crazy because the union of heaven and earth is what the story of the Bible is all about. How they were once fully united and then driven apart, and about how God is bringing them back together once again.
Everybody got it? All right, so we have this idea that one, good and bad, there is good. And we all kind of know this at some level with wherever we are in our faith. There is some realm, some hope, some desire, some way that things were or things that could be that are good. And we are trying to get to good or back to good. And we all know at some level that there's bad. There's things that are not the way they are supposed to be. There are things that break our hearts. There are things that are disastrous and just heartbreaking in our world. And the question is the way of Jesus, is it the thing that is helping us get to the good? Or is the way of Jesus just another part that will eventually break our heart, that will eventually be a part of the negativity of our world? So that's kind of the backdrop for today. So here is the story. Once, Jesus was driving out a demon that was mute. Who wants to guess? So good or bad, are demons on the good side or the bad side? Who thinks good side? Who thinks bad side? All right, you guys passed the test. Good. In case anybody was kind of already in this story nervous, and there's a bunch of things in the story that can make you nervous, about the idea of, okay, seriously? We're talking about demons? I'm supposed to believe in that? And that's okay, I get that. It is interesting. So in our world, a lot of us haven't had a lot of exposure to demons. Maybe some of you have, but that's not a normal thing we talk about in our world. In Jesus' day, there was a lot of talk of demons, and there was a lot of talk of exorcisms. And this was happening a lot in Israel, and it was happening a lot in the Roman Empire, where people talked about things that were wrong, and they talked about them as being demon-possessed. What were they all? That's a really good question. So there's a Jewish historian, his name is Josephus, and he talks about that lots of Jewish historians were casting out demons by using the wisdom of Solomon. Solomon was an ancient king of Israel, and Josephus says that they use this ancient wisdom of Solomon where they would use herbs to help cast out demons, which do with that what you like, but it does kind of give you the idea that's like, ooh, maybe there was some things that they were calling demons that maybe herbs could somehow throw out. So maybe there was something a little bit more physical going on. To be honest, what was going on in this story, what was going on in other stories, I don't totally know. And to be honest, I don't totally care. Because what we all do know is that there are things in our world physically, things emotionally, and things spiritually that drag other people down, that oppress other people. And whatever was making this gentleman mute, whatever was taking away his ability to be able to speak, was putting him in an ostracized, underprivileged position. And so now Jesus was going to drive this demon out. And when the demon left the man who had been mute, he spoke, and the crowds were amazed. And it's interesting, what were they amazed at? One, they were amazed that an exorcism has taken place. But also, the story of this is they're trying to figure out who is Jesus. And so now they have just seen this guy who, this is an isolated event. Jesus has been claiming all of these really crazy things about himself, about being the Messiah, about being the Son of David, about being God. And now all of a sudden there's this guy that's been claiming this, and now he has just driven out a demon, which is the exact thing that he claimed he was going to do. Some of you guys remember from Luke chapter 4, Jesus made this big entry-level claim that the Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. And he has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, and to set the oppressed free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And many people who would have heard that when he first said that would have said, that sounds nice, but you're going to have to prove it. You have to show that you actually have the ability and the power to actually do that. And now in this story, they have just seen Jesus take someone who is captive, someone who is under the oppression of something that was making his life very difficult. And he now shows that he had the power to cast it out. And there was a group of people that were amazed at this because they're like, maybe this shows that he actually is the guy. You're going to see three different categories in this story today. And this is the first category. And some of you, this is like where you would place yourself. I think each of you will find yourself in one of these categories. And some of you will place yourself in the category of, yeah, I've seen Jesus do some things. And because of what I've seen Jesus do, I am amazed. And it's kind of showing me that he actually is who he claimed to be. And that's great. Some of you, though, you're like, I have some questions still. And that's good. You're in good company with that because there's another category. It says, but there's some of them who said it's by Beelzebul, or Beelzebub, different translations, the prince of the demons, that he is driving out demons. Some of the people watch Jesus do, they're like, you know what? He just did something good. But just because it looks good doesn't necessarily mean that it is good. Because they knew what all of us know, that sometimes things that look good at first are actually really, really bad. There's an ancient proverb that's in the Bible that says that there is a way that appears to be right, but in the end, it leads to death. And some of us have lived that, right? We started dating someone, and it appeared to be right, but it actually didn't lead. We started a job, and it's like, this is the best job ever. And then a little bit, you're like, oh, this place is toxic. You get some sort of a deal, 0 down, 0% financing. It seems too good to be true. It was too good to be true. And there's some things that just because they look good, some people actually see, oh, that's actually bad. One of the crazier experiences I had with this, years ago, I used to lead a number of different trips down to the country of Guatemala. And we would go down there, and there's a village that we were working in, and they were trying to bring good to the community, trying to drive out the bad, do good things. And they did this they had a school, and so they were helping kids who weren't previously being educated to get educated. They would give nutrition out, and so they would help give the kids food. And they would try to address other needs when they presented themselves. And so one of the needs they found is that kids were having lots of respiratory issues, and kids were having they were getting burned, and the reason is because in the village and the houses, they would cook their meals by just having an open flame inside their house, and so it was creating lots of smoke in the house, and then like little kids would fall in the fire. Not a good situation, and so they came up with a plan of, if we could get these clean air stoves in the house, then we could build this kind of like cement stove, and it would vent out the top of the house, and then it would use way less wood, and so that was really good. It would be safe, and so kids wouldn't fall in it, and then it wouldn't create any smoke in the house. And so I led 3 different teams down there, and we built over 100 different clean air stoves. It was really, really amazing. On our first trip down there, we spent all week long building the stoves. We built 40 stoves, I think, on our first trip. And on the last day, we built the last stove. It was really exciting, and we went back to where we were staying. And we got word from our folks that were in the village and said, there's a riot happening in the village right now. And there's a group of people that are saying they are going to go into all of the houses where you just installed these stoves, and they are going to destroy them. They are going to just absolutely get rid of these. We're like, oh my gosh, this is good. Why are you so mad at this thing? And here's what they thought. So apparently in Guatemala and in other countries, there is some large cement companies. And the cement companies want to come in and just kind of like take huge tracts of land and be able to take the minerals out of there to be able to make cement. But there's people living on there, so they have to figure out how to get rid of the people. And so what they would do is they would go into villages like the one we were working in, and they would do good things. They would start schools. They would give away meals. They would help other people. And once they built trust with the people, then they would say, hey, why don't we just like take over the governance of your town? And why don't you sign some of your land over to us? And then once they would sign the land over, then they would bulldoze everything, and they would get rid of all the people, and then they would create a cement mine there. And so there was this thought that even though we were there and we said we were doing good things, it seemed like we were good people doing good things, maybe we were actually working for the cement company. Maybe we were actually working for the bad people, and it was going to come back and it was going to bite them. And that's what's happening in this story, is these people are watching Jesus do this good thing, and they're like, this seems good, but maybe you're actually like working for the bad people. Maybe you're actually doing something that's going to actually lead us to harm. And for some of you, this is right till your like point of why you have a problem with Christianity. Or maybe why you have some friends who have a real problem with Christianity, is that Christians say that they're about love and generosity, but then you see different things that Christians have done, like the Crusades, the Inquisition, modern day Christian nationalism, all kinds of other stories of church hurt and church trauma. We're like, yeah, they say they're out to help, but let me tell you, they are not actually out there to help. And so this is a legit concern that some folks have. So that's next group. Maybe Jesus is actually doing something harmful, and maybe that's the category you would put yourself in. Then there's a next category. So the others tested him by asking for a sign from heaven. Like, cool trick that you threw the demon out, that's neat. But you've claimed something pretty big about yourself. And so if you want us to believe that you're really that, we're going to need more than just an exorcism. We're going to need more than just making a mute person talk. We're going to need a bigger sign than that. And so we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this actually in 2 weeks. If you want to read ahead in Luke chapter 11, you can see what Jesus is going to say, no secrets. But we're actually going to talk about it in 2 weeks on Easter Sunday. And we're going to talk about the sign or the signs, plural, that Jesus talks about that he's willing to offer. And so if you're looking for a sign, you need some more proof, you're in good company, and we're going to talk about that in a couple weeks. But for this week, we're going to look at what Jesus has to say about these people that are wondering maybe he's actually working for the bad side. And here's how Jesus responds to them. And he responds with a piece of something that's very logical and also kind of surprising or dramatic, depending on how you want to say it. So Jesus knew their thoughts and said to them, "Any kingdom divided against itself is going to be ruined, and a house divided against itself will fall. If Satan is divided against Satan himself, how can his kingdom stand? And I say this because you claim that I drive out demons by Beelzebul." So this is fairly logical if you can put yourself in this mind frame. So what Jesus is saying is that when you think of a kingdom, when you think of a house, when you think of any kind of an organizational structure, it needs to be unified. And all of us know this. If you've ever played on a sports team, if you've been a part of an office, if you've been a part of a government, you know, if everyone is kind of unified and moving towards the same goals, things really, really work well. But if you've ever been in an office where, you know, there's different bosses and they have very different ideas of how we should handle this, if you've been in a family and you're going to go on a family vacation and they have very different ideas about how you're supposed to do this, if you've been in a family and very different ideas of how you're supposed to parent your kids, all kinds of different situations where if you have too many cooks in the kitchen, if you have too many ideas of how you're supposed to do something, just division does not work well. And systems, kingdoms, sports teams, whatever, if they're going to really last, if they're going to really show, then they need to be unified. So that's kind of the logic behind it. And now Jesus is presenting something that maybe you haven't thought of before. It's this idea of different kingdoms in this world. And so we're going to talk about God's kingdom and then the kingdom of evil, the kingdom of bad, or the kingdom of Satan. And what he's saying is that whatever you might think of the kingdom of evil, the kingdom of Satan, it's not good. But he's saying, at the very least, they are unified. They are an effective group. They have been around for a very long time, and they are very good at what they do. And they couldn't do what they do if they weren't completely unified and just all on the same mission together. Another way that Jesus talked about the same idea, as Jesus says, "No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit." So he's saying, if you want to, how do I know whether an organization is really good or evil? And just saying, both the good and the bad are very unified. They are very good and effective at what they do. And so both of the, if something's good, maybe in the short term, it might seem hard, it might seem difficult, but in the long term, you're always going to see, if it's good, you're going to see that it is good. And if it's bad, even if it's deceptive at first and kind of suckers you in, what's really bad will always show up bad. And all of us kind of know this from life experience. Things that seem too good to be true, things that seem like sucker us in, if they're truly disastrous for us, it always shakes out in the end. We find out that person was really toxic. There was really a lot of terrible stuff in this. We always kind of see it in the long term. Later on, a guy named Paul will talk about what this different fruit that different trees produce. And he says that on the bad side, what the evil side is very effective at doing is the acts of the flesh are obvious. Sexual morality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy. This is where the evil side always ends up. This is what the kingdom of evil is this is what they want to sow in our world. Again, unfortunately, as we look around at any newspaper, many of our own families, many of our own lives, the kingdom of evil is alive and well, and they are very effective at getting the results that they want. On the other hand, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. If you want to know whether something is truly good in the long term, this is what it always produces. Is this making me more loving? Is this creating more joy in the world? Is this giving me more peace? And is this creating more peace in my family and the friends that I spend time with? This is what it always develops into. And again, Jesus is making this idea that when if the evil was divided, it wouldn't always be so effective in creating evil. And if the kingdom of good wasn't so together and unified, then it wouldn't be so effective in creating really, really good things. Have these two different kingdoms. And then Jesus is going to make this kind of next big claim. Because the question, again, in all of this is, okay, there's different kingdoms in this world. There's good that's producing good. There's bad that's creating bad. But at some level, what is the answer? If there's an evil empire that's creating all kinds of envy and terrible things in this world, then what is it that's going to be able to battle against it? And what Jesus is going to claim next is one of the times throughout Luke, and he does this multiple times throughout Luke, where it kind of is like, whoa, like you're not just claiming to because if Jesus were to take this and say, look, there's two different kingdoms. There's a good, there's a bad, and I want you to know I'm officially a part of the good side. I am a representative for the good side. Come and follow me, and I will teach you the ways of the good side. That would have been a big enough claim on its own, and that's, as we're trying to look at the question, who is Jesus? That's a question, that's an answer that a lot of people come up with, is that Jesus is someone who can show us the way to the good side. But Jesus is going to take it up a next level. And so here's what Jesus says. He says, but if I drive out demons by the finger of God, then the kingdom of God has come on you. What is the finger of God? It's this weird little Hebrew phrase that is only used one other time, and it's found in the Old Testament, and here's where it is found. It's when a guy named Moses goes up to a mountain, he's going to get the law, the 10 Commandments, all the ways that the people of Israel were supposed to live. And said when the Lord finished speaking to Moses on Mount Sinai, he gave him 2 tablets, seen that, of the covenant of the law. The tablets of the stone were inscribed by the finger of God. And so what all the people of Israel believed is that when Moses went up on the mountain, it wasn't that Moses came up with these laws or that any humans came up with, here's the way you're supposed to live, but that these tablets were literally inscribed by God himself. And now here's Jesus saying, you're trying to figure out if I'm on the good side or the bad side. Let me tell you what. I'm not only on the good side, I'm the one in charge of the good side. I'm not the one who's just teaching you about the rules. I'm the one who came up with the rules. I'm the one who wrote these things down. If you're asking the question, who is Jesus? One of the ways you could describe that is Jesus is the finger of God. Jesus is the one who tells us exactly the way that we are supposed to live. And then Jesus uses kind of this interesting analogy, because now we have these two different kingdoms. We have Jesus, and he has just claimed who he is. And now he gives us kind of this metaphor parable. It says, when a strong man, fully armed, guards his own house, his possessions are safe. But when someone stronger attacks and overpowers him, he takes away the armor in which the man trusted and divides up his plunder. So in this kind of story, metaphor, parable that Jesus is telling, there's two different characters. There's a strong man, and then there's an even stronger man. So based off of what we've talked about so far, two different kingdoms, kingdom of evil, kingdom of good. When Jesus is talking about the strong man, who do you think that represents in the story? Okay, that's Satan. That's the devil. That's evil. And Jesus wants to make it very, very clear that when we're talking, again, about the kingdom of evil and Satan, he pulls no punches with this, that this is a strong figure. This is an incredibly effective at making terrible things happen. And that's something, again, that all of us know. We live in a world where the reign of evil is incredibly strong. It feels like it is like fully armed. Its possessions are totally safe. And we wonder when we look at the evil of this world, when we look at racism of this world, when we look at the wars and violence of this world, when we look at the way that other people objectify other people and take advantage of other people, the weight of evil just seems so. It feels like a strong man who is fully armed, and who in the world could ever take that person out? And then it says that there is a stronger. Who do you think is the stronger person? It's church, come on. Who's the stronger person? This is Jesus saying, here's who I am. I am the stronger person. And throughout this whole story, Jesus is trying to make this like a distinction between us. That there are kingdoms of this world. That there is a kingdom of Satan, and there is a kingdom of God. And they are at battle with each other. They are a battle for each of us. They are a battle for our city. They are a battle for our kids. They are a battle for all of humanity. And what Jesus is asking us is, who do we believe that he is? And he is inviting us to say that who I am is I am the person who has the power. I am the person that has the authority. I am the person to actually be stronger than all of these evil forces and drive these things out. And friends, that is my hope, and that is my prayer. Because I am just so sick and tired of seeing our world just get drugged down further and further and further. And seeing the reign of evil just cascade throughout so much. And with every story of another person who died of a bomb, of every neighborhood that's being oppressed and being thrown down by systemic systems that are keeping them poor, that are keeping little kids injured. What we need in our world is we need a stronger, better kingdom. And what Jesus has claimed, and what we all have to decide if we're going to believe is, are we going to believe that he actually is the head of this kingdom? And we can choose. We can choose to believe and to be amazed. We can choose to say, nah, I think that it's all actually evil and it's all working for something bad. Or we can choose to ask more questions and more for a sign. And that's for all of us to wrestle with, and that's what this text is calling us to. Let's pray. Jesus, truly, it is easy for each of us to come up with and write down a list of the things that we see that are wrong, that are heartbreaking. It's easy for us to look in ourselves and see how much the evil in our own hearts has hurt ourselves and has hurt the other people in our lives. And at some level, I think every single one of us is looking for an answer. We all want the good. We all want peace. We all want love. We all want things to be made right. And in this text and in so many others, we are being invited to believe that the way for things to be made right is not in our own effort. It's not just in us obeying a certain amount of teachings. It's not just a matter of any kind of just alone human effort. But we need a stronger force than the already strong forces that we see and that we feel. And you are claiming to be that stronger force. And that if we put our hope and our trust and our obedience into you and into you fully, then you will lead us into a new and better kingdom, rejoining what the whole thing is about your kingdom of heaven coming fully to earth and reigning and replacing and defeating this kingdom of evil. Help us as we wrestle with that, because there's a lot in there to believe, a lot for us to question and doubt, a lot for us to decide what does that look like in our hearts and minds and being to truly join and believe. And so I invite us all to wrestle with that